again, the Prophet did his job by enforcing this. He's following the sunnah of Isa alayhi salam before him. And he's making these people pledge their allegiance to him and to the cause. The word that's used for the disciples in the Bible, in the Quran, is hawariyun. Let me just explain what this term hawariyun means. A hawari, it's somebody who is a devotee of somebody else, a disciple, somebody who's totally devoted to that person, who recognizes that person as a master, and is willing to serve that person, to learn from that person, and so forth. Right? So somebody who's totally devoted to somebody else is a hawari. It comes from the root hawar, ha, wa, ra. Hawar in Arabic means whiteness. Are you familiar with the term hur, like hur'in? In the Quran, these mates that are promised to the people in paradise, male and female. Like hur'in doesn't necessarily indicate just women. Hur'in, the form in Arabic grammar, the form hur, is a plural for both the masculine ahwar and the feminine hawra. And the same for ayn, it's the plural of the masculine a'yan and also the feminine ayna. Right, so when the Quran says hur'in, it's not simply talking about women who will be there in paradise as mates for believing men, but equally indicated are mates for the women who are also in paradise. Right? Male mates who are there for the women. Alright, so the reason I said that the root of hawari is the same as the root for hur'in. The reason they're called hur, ahwar or hawra, is because the whiteness and the blackness of their eyes is very stark. And sometimes you might see someone who has a kind of dull eyes. They don't have a sparkle to their eyes. But some people have a sparkle to their eyes. Right? They're very intensely black, and then the whiteness is intensely white, like big white eyes and a big black inside of them. Right? That's called somebody who's ahwar or hawra. Right? That whiteness is really intense. The contrast between the white and black is there. It's a way of expressing beauty. Maybe if you see it, it's probably more beautiful than when I describe it. But when we see certain kinds of eyes, we're really attracted to them. Certain colors, certain shapes, right? We're really attracted to them. So the Quran is trying to describe a particularly attractive kind of eye as a characteristic of these mates that are going to be there in paradise for us, inshallah. So that's the common root between these. The reason the hawari are called are named in a way that refers to whiteness, there's several reasons that people give. The most, probably the best opinion, and the most liked opinion amongst the commentators, is that they're called hawari because they're pure in and of themselves, as though they've washed themselves. When you wash something, it becomes, a white cloth, it would become nice and white, as opposed to being dingy. It's as though they've washed their souls, they've cleansed themselves, and they're also there as washers of other people's souls. As a teacher, as a trainer of other people, right, they're going to take from Isa alayhi salam and then transfer that knowledge and that training to other people. And so in that process, they're going to whiten the souls of others. Right? So that's one of the reasons. Or it's because they're completely devoted to Isa alayhi salam. Right? They're devotees of Isa. And so again, it's as though they kind of purified themselves of all else, and they've kind of devoted themselves solely for Isa alayhi salam. It's similar to the word mukhlis. Right? If you're familiar with the word mukhlis, someone who's mukhlis is somebody who's kind of removed everything else and is solely for you. If he's mukhlis ilallah, then he's solely devoted to Allah. He's cleared everything besides God out of his heart, out of his mind. Okay? So it's a similar term. There are also some people who say they're called hawariyin because they were all washermen. They all used to wash clothes, right? And so because they wash the clothes and remove the dirt from the clothes and make them white, they're called hawari. It's not very poetic, and there's no real indication of that. I'll read a hadith later where the Imam actually addresses the meaning of the word hawari and how they came to be called that. Alright, so the hawari is mentioned about 4 or 5 times in the Quran. I think maybe 4 times in the Quran, and it always refers to these disciples. Now we know from ahadith and also from the Bible that there are 12 of them. Right, there are 12 of these disciples, and again, I'll read some ahadith for you later that indicate that. But in the Quran, there's no mention of how many they were or who they were, what their names were. Okay, recite the salawat, please. Actually, yeah, let me show you this hadith because I have it here on the screen right now. So Imam Rida was asked, "Lima summi al-hawariyun al-hawariyin?" Why were the hawariyin called to this? He says, "Amma 'inda an-nas فسموا الحواريون الحواريين لأنهم كانوا مخلصين في أنفسهم ومخلصين لغيرهم." Yeah, I think I misquoted this. Anyway, what it does read, I misquoted it here. He says that with the way people think about it, they think that they're called Hawariyin because they washed clothes. But he says, as for us, the Ahlul Bayt, the way we understand it, the reason they were called Hawariyin is because they were pure in and of themselves and they purified others. And so he said that's the reason they're really called Hawariyin, because they purify themselves, they whiten their own hearts, and then they whiten other people's hearts by teaching them and training them. Okay. Now, if you look at this phrase, the response of the Hawariyin, of the disciples to Jesus, is that we will be your helpers. He's asking for helpers. He's on the path. Right? He's on a path towards Allah. He needs support to help him on this path, because his resources are limited, his ability is limited. Right? A prophet by himself, he might be a prophet for all mankind, but he can't single-handedly reach out to all mankind. He needs to have people there to help him to be his deputies, so he can send them forth, and they can teach people. And when he raises his military, he's also going to need people to be there to fight, to lead the army, and so forth. Right? So Jesus, like I said yesterday, he's not simply a spiritual leader. Like none of the prophets were spiritual leaders solely. They were spiritual and political leaders. They led people in all aspects of life. And so if Jesus had the support, then he would have raised an army and fought his enemies. But he didn't have the power. He didn't have the support amongst the people, so he couldn't do that. At the end of the sentence, they say, "We believe in God, and we ask you to testify that we have submitted." Right? For one thing, when they say we believe in God, and the word in Arabic is that we're Muslimun, we're Muslim. Right? Muslim here doesn't mean that they're Muslim in the sense that we know it, that they follow the Sharia of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They weren't responsible for this Sharia that we have now. They are still responsible for the Sharia of Moses with some amendments. Right? So when they say Muslim, they mean it in the literal sense, that we are completely submitted to Allah, the will of Allah. Now, they're not just becoming Muslim right now. They're not just becoming Christian right now. These people, they were already his devotees before he had this conversation with them. These 12 people had shown themselves to be outstanding people, spiritually, good followers, good students of him. That's why they're called Hawariyin. Now he has a conversation with them, and he says to the people in general, who's going to be my supporter? And very similar to how the Prophet said this. Right? Remember, he gathered his family one time together. When he first started his mission, he gathered the Banu Hashim together. He already knew that Ali was his supporter, but in public, he gives the option. He tells everyone, he said, who's my Khalifa? Who's going to be my Wasi? Who's going to be my vice chair after me? Right? Nobody raises their hand. In fact, some of them make fun of him. Like Abu Lahab and some of the others, they make fun of him and say, let's stop this nonsense, let's get on with the food. Right? After 2 or 3 parties, he finally is able to get the word out, and Imam Ali is always the one to respond and say, I'll do it, I'll be the one. So it's a similar conversation happening now with Jesus and the Jews. He's asking them in general, who's going to be my support? And only those 12 people who are his devout students, only they say yes, and they come forward and say, we'll help you. So they're not just becoming Muslim at this point. When they say we believe and we are submitted to God, they're talking about a very high level of faith, a very strong